classes until September. And now it is my really heartfelt great pleasure to introduce Gareth Young. Gareth and I have been friends since we served together on the FAMA board, Faith Alliance of Metro Atlanta board, very quick, soon after I came here in 2010. And he has been a personal friend and a friend of this center, and someone whose work I have admired, watching him continue to grow and expand his scope. He's the founder of the Red Clay Sangha, and truly a remarkable human being. Thank you for taking the opportunity to be with us this morning. And so now it's yours for the hour. I won't say anything more until it's the end of the hour and time to close with a prayer. Thanks again for making time for us.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. It is an honor and a privilege to be with this community.
All these motherfuckers.
I beg your pardon?
That was, I think that's somebody in the bottom right who's not muted on my screen. So everybody who's not muted might want to mute themselves.
Yeah.
Or whoever's administering this might want to
mute that person who just made that rude remark.
So anyway, yeah, it's an honor and a privilege, and thank you for the invitation to talk, Brother Shankara. The Vedanta Center, Brother Shankara has been a dear friend, and the Vedanta Center has been very, very good to Red Clay Sangha and a friend of our community since we were formed about 10 years ago as well. When we first started out, we were homeless, and Brother Shankara offered us the use of the chapel on, I believe at the time it was Tuesday evenings, and we came to meet every week and sit in the chapel, meditate in the chapel, and hold our reading group there for several months. So it's, I have very, very fond memories of that and of breakfast at the center with Brother Shankara. I would be remiss not to acknowledge, as I look at the names, other people here. I feel like I'm with old friends. I saw Cindy's picture up here a minute ago. She's now, I'm not sure she's there. And Nina, hello Nina, it's been forever. Been a long time. So anyway, so we at Red Clay are practicing pretty much like you are right now, online, Zoom, and it's working very well for us. I hope it is for you. Not the same as meeting in person, but there's a lot in there when we do that. What I will be talking about today is a specific Buddhist sutra. It's called the Anapanasati Sutta. I do not speak Pali or know the language, so my translations are the translations of others, and I'm sure I'm abusing those translations, so to the extent I'm pulling in inappropriate translations or mismeanings, I apologize, but I think the thrust of it will work. So in Pali, the Anapanasati translates into English roughly as breathe in, breathe out, mindfulness. And that's what this is about. So I am here talking about that to a bunch of Vedantists I have chosen that as the topic to talk to a bunch of Vedantists about, firstly because it's very important to me personally. Maybe a year ago, I was finding my concentration and my practice was wandering a little bit, and I really wanted to reground myself and refocus myself, and I started working with this sutra, and it really has transformed my practice, and it is a very important part of my life right now. Secondly, as best I can tell, both from broad readings and from references within the sutras themselves, this is likely what Buddha's core practice was at the time when he was in the heart of his spiritual practice, and he reached his own realization. So I think it's important from that standpoint. It is, on the one hand, very simple, and on the other hand, very deep. And so there's a lot in here for people who are open to plagiarized tools, shall we say, which I certainly am, and I suspect the majority of you are, and with Vedanta being a fairly open practice. And it's a fairly accessible approach to a broad array of Buddhist teachings. There's the heart of Buddhist teaching is generally pointed at the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, which certainly do a great job of capturing a lot of the spirit, but there's a lot more there, and this kind of opens the door to some of that. So what I'm going to do to start with, the sutra is, it's not long, it's about 6 or 8 pages in a standard book, but the heart of it is much shorter than that. So I'm just going to read the heart of it, which is about 2 pages, and then I will talk through that and repeat sections as I do so, and then we'll have a hopefully, well not hopefully, we will have time for a healthy discussion at the end of this, because lecture without discussion is generally not very connecting. So here we go. Bhikkhus, and a bhikkhu is a monk in this context. Bhikkhus, a bhikkhu within this training, having gone into the forest, to the base of a tree, or to an empty dwelling, having sat cross-legged with his body erect, surely maintains mindfulness. Ever mindful, that bhikkhu breathes in, ever mindful, she breathes out. While breathing in long, she fully comprehends, I breathe in long. While breathing out long, she fully comprehends, I breathe out long. While breathing in short, he fully comprehends, I breathe in short. While breathing out short, he fully comprehends, I breathe out short. He trains himself thus, thoroughly experiencing all bodies, I shall breathe in. He trains himself thoroughly experiencing all bodies, I shall breathe out. She trains herself, calming the bodily conditioner, I shall breathe in. She trains herself, calming the body conditioner, I shall breathe out. And actually, I'm going to pause there rather than read the whole thing. I will just read it in sections. It is really in 4 sections, and I just read the introduction in the first section. I'm going to pause there because this will give a chance to give a little bit of a structure to it. So the first part, entering the forest, going to the base of the tree, sitting cross-legged, maintaining mindfulness. The spirit with which one enters contemplation practice is really important. Brother Shankara opened this this morning's session with a prayer that accomplishes the formal connection with the divine and the devotion, but it also accomplishes for the congregants and the community a spirit and a mind space with which we enter. So if one enters a practice with gratitude, having, expressing gratitude practice to start with, or expressing compassion towards others, that shapes the practice as we move forward. So that initial piece of shaping our practice, going into that still place, that seclusion, and how we enter the practice is a very important piece of this. So the first tetrad, as it's called, which is these first 4 things I talked through: breathing, experiencing the body, and calming the body. This is focused on body. The next 4 are focused on feelings. The next 4 on mind, and the next 4 on phenomena. So this, there's to the point I made earlier about there being many different Buddhist teachings, one of the core Buddhist teachings is the 4 establishments of mindfulness, often translated as the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but I prefer establishments or bases of mindfulness. And they are mindfulness of the body, of the feelings, of the mind, and of phenomena, which is looking at a way of breaking down the world that we live in, the world that we are, and being mindful of each of those, working through mindfulness with each of those, or on and in each of those. And this establishing mindfulness in this tradition has 2 edges, or 2 directions. The first is cultivating stillness. So that's the introduction we had, which is settling down, base of the tree, sitting cross-legged. That's creating stillness. And then the second piece of it is training ourselves. We shift from being aware. So the first two, we're breathing in short, we comprehend, we're breathing in short. And then we move to, we train ourselves, experiencing all bodies, we breathe in. We train ourselves, calming the body. So this move to training. In there's cultivating insight. So it's seeing the nature of being. So on the one hand, we're cultivating stillness, and out of that stillness, the space to develop insight emerges, to see more clearly the world that we are in, the world that we are. And this is a very gentle teaching. So breathing in long, he fully comprehends I breathe in long. Breathing out long, he fully comprehends I breathe out long. The same with short. It is all there in the breath. And this is in many branches of Hinduism. It's there in the teachings as well. It's all in the breath. Paying attention to the subtlety of the breath. What does breathing in long mean? How long is long? Is that deep? Is that slow? And what does it really feel like to breathe in long as opposed to breathing in short? What does that do? What does breathing in versus breathing out do? Is there a difference in experience of this? Paying attention to the real subtle detail is where this takes us. And when we're stable enough in the breath, we then move from just being aware of this breath and paying attention to the breath to the body and being in and with the whole body. And if we allow ourselves to settle into stillness and then move our awareness into the body and start practicing with the body, there's a much richer experience of the body that is available to us, which actually naturally takes us into the second tetrad, as it's called. He trains himself thoroughly experiencing joy. I shall breathe in. He trains himself thoroughly experiencing joy. I shall breathe out. She trains herself thoroughly experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe in. She trains herself thoroughly experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe out. He trains himself thoroughly experiencing the feelings. I shall breathe in. He trains himself thoroughly experiencing the feelings. I shall breathe out. She trains herself calming the feelings. I shall breathe in. She trains herself calming the feelings. I shall breathe out. Again, training as we go through these steps. The words I translated, or that word translated for the first two, joy, for those of you who are interested in the Pali or the Sanskrit here, piti, and sukha is pleasure. So we were in the body, calming the body, and then we moved into thoroughly experiencing joy. For those of you, or of us, yeah, of you, because I'm talking to you, for those of you who have really deep physical body immersion experiences, whether that could be running, that could be playing the piano, it could be dancing, something where you are truly deeply in your body, and that's all there is. That is joy. There's something really exciting and almost thrilling. It's not a peaceful thing. It's a very energetic joy, a deeply embodied joy. And that's what this first point is looking at. If we're really settled when we move into the body, then we are truly in the body, and that's it. And out of that, just this physical joy, this joy of being a physical being can emerge. That settles down and it leaves behind this deep contentment, this pleasure. So that's just a natural progression, and it is there if we just take our time moving through it. Then we move into experiencing the feelings. Now, in Buddhism, feelings, they don't mean like being happy, being sad, being joyful, being angry. Feelings are feeling tones, and they're very simple and very basic. The feeling tones are pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So being with the feelings is saying, what is it like to have a pleasant feeling? Recognizing that somewhere underneath that experience that we then put all these labels on is just this simple pleasant feeling. And what is that pleasant feeling like? It's not saying, what is it like to be angry when somebody cuts me off, or when the dog eats jumps up on the table and eats the food I had set out for my dinner. It's to notice that underneath that feeling of anger, there's an unpleasant feeling. There's a feeling of unpleasant. And it's to go down and tune into what that feeling of unpleasant is. So being with our feelings is going down to that very primitive, simple level of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, which can be really subtle, but it's really, really simple. And the teaching here is, or the practice here is, that where we start to get into trouble, and this is all dependent on origination and causation, when we start to get into trouble is where we allow our feelings to move into clinging or craving or attachments. So when we're no longer just with the feelings, but we say, oh, I like that. I want some more of that. Oh, I don't like that. Really don't like that. Maybe I hate that. Maybe I'm angry about that. It's crossing that edge, which is something that lack of mindfulness will allow us to take, right? So this is about being with those feelings and then calming those feelings. Feeling turns. So then we move into the third tetrad, which is about mind. So he trains himself thoroughly experiencing the mind, I shall breathe in. He trains himself thoroughly experiencing the mind, I shall breathe out. He trains himself gladdening the mind, I shall breathe in. He trains himself gladdening the mind, I shall breathe out. She trains herself concentrating the mind, I shall breathe in. She trains herself concentrating the mind, I shall breathe out. She trains herself liberating the mind, I shall breathe in. She trains herself liberating the mind, I shall breathe out. So we're going through experiencing the mind, gladdening the mind, concentrating the mind, and liberating the mind. So the mind we're talking about here is obviously really complicated. But in simple terms, the mind we're talking about here is a very open, spacious mind. It's not a mind that's full of our thoughts. We've gone from the feelings, and we've been with the feelings and calmed the feelings, which has headed off this tendency to escalation, to proliferation, to move into emotions and into projections and perceptions and so forth. And it's keeping us in this much more stable, calm, open space. So mind here is like the big blue sky. Mind here is like the open space. And it's one where clouds drift in, clouds drift out. Thoughts drift in and thoughts drift out. They're all visitors here. And they're all welcome visitors. They're visitors who are welcome to come and welcome to leave. And we really don't engage with them. They just pass through, like they do through the sky. So this is that very open mind. So we experience that mind. And when we're comfortable with that experience, we move into gladdening it. The next step is concentration, and gladdening, it creates an energy, if you like, that allows us to move through the rest of this process. Because if there's just this empty space, it's really hard to stay there. There's got to be something that recognizes the beauty and the wonder of it. So there's a gladdening that happens. There's a deliberate flowering and a recognition of beauty in this. Concentrating here doesn't mean the hard work of making ourselves pay attention to adding up a list of numbers or getting a task done or driving on a dark lane in the rain at night. Concentrating here is about a bringing together. It's a gathering. Concentrating the mind isn't an intentional act of force. It's just a gathering, a collection. And again, it's a very natural thing because we already are, in a sense. It's recognizing that what's already there. So there's this concentration that happens. And then liberating is the freedom that comes from this. So if we realize all I am, right? All I am is this sky and everything moves through me. And that's a beautiful, joyous thing. That's incredibly liberating. incredibly freeing. So this freedom, this liberation is something that grows naturally from that. So we've been through breathing and body. We've been through the feelings, which are feeling tones, and count the feeling tones. We've been through the mind and seeing the mind as just space, as open sky. Where do we go from there? Well, now we go out and we go into the phenomena. So the next the next tetrad reads, he trains himself constantly contemplating impermanence. I shall breathe in. He trains himself constantly contemplating impermanence. I shall breathe out. She trains herself constantly contemplating fading away. I shall breathe in. She trains herself constantly contemplating fading away. I shall breathe out, and the Pali word there is viraga. He trains himself constantly contemplating quenching, which is nirodha. I shall breathe in. He trains himself constantly contemplating quenching. I shall breathe out. She trains herself constantly contemplating letting go. Patini saga. I shall breathe in. She trains herself constantly contemplating letting go. I shall breathe out. Because this is how Anapanasati, which one has developed and made much of, has great fruit and great benefit. So we have contemplating impermanence, fading away, or a dispassion, quenching or cessation, and then letting go. Impermanence, everything. In Buddhism, one of the core teachings, and maybe Buddha's most important teaching, is the impermanence of everything. The impermanence of me, the impermanence of you, the impermanence of the environment we're having our conversation in. And impermanence, as we come to experience it, is not a bad thing. It's actually an incredibly beautiful thing, an absolutely necessary thing. If things were not impermanent, nothing could come to be. It is only through impermanence that things can come to be. We go out there on it's a summer day now, and look at the daylilies that are just over. You look at one of those daylilies, they're exquisite, but they're only possible because they only last a day. If they lasted forever, they'd be made of plastic, and we get pretty sick of them. It's their very fragility, their very impermanence that makes them beautiful. It's our very fragility, our very impermanence that allows us to be what we are and to manifest the divine and to be beautiful. So this impermanence, it goes completely against the grain of an enormous amount of human conditioning, which is to want to hold on to things, to want to make things permanent, to pick up my pen or my paper or my book, or even this teaching, and hold on to it as something valuable. But that holding on to it is never going to make us happy. Because even this book will probably outlast me, but what I've got with this book really is only my understanding of it, and my understanding is going to shift over time. So it's just inherently and fundamentally impermanent. So that impermanence is just an incredibly important Buddhist teaching. So we move from the mind to then contemplating, training on the impermanence of everything. And that impermanence, recognizing the impermanence of everything, naturally leads to a letting go of things, to a dispassion about things, about stuff, about even this sack of skin and bones right here. If I really start to move into impermanence, there is nothing to hold on to. And so I naturally start letting go of things, and things naturally start fading away, which is pointing at the Buddhist truth of suffering and the end of suffering. So there's actually three marks of Buddhism: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. And that's another angle on Buddhist teachings, which is a really important one, which doesn't show up much outside certain circles, but that's what this is pointing at here. So with impermanence leads us to let go of, leads us to leads things to fade away, leads to this dispassion, which is losing the suffering. And the next one is contemplating quenching or cessation or nirodha. That's the loss of self that comes with this realization. As I see stuff is impermanent and I'm impermanent, as things start to fade away, there's nowhere in that story for there to be an independent self. There's nowhere there for me to get stuck on a me or a you. Now, that's not to put aside the practical reality that we're walking into the world and I bump into walls and doors, and there's a sack of skin and bones here that does get angry. But it is to say that when I move into this space of calmness and of cultivating insight, I can see that deeper reality, that there really is no self. And I can bring that forward into my everyday human interaction world and recognize that deep reality as I engage with the world and I engage with others. And it brings a level of calm, a level of compassion, a level of connection. One of my favorite stories is Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton left the monastery. This is in his autobiography, which is a book I quote but haven't read. He left the monastery at Gethsemane one day and went wandering down the high street going shopping. They went out just every once in a blue moon. And as he walked down the high street, he fell on his hands and knees. He was just overcome with awe. And he looked at the people who were walking past. He said, "Your God, and your God, and your God. If only you all knew it." And this is the kind of direct personal experience that can come through these practices of contemplating impermanence and then letting that take us to this non-attachment to stuff, and then to the natural fading away of this sense of identity. And that in turn leads to this really deep letting go. There's nothing left to hold on to. And we let go even of letting go, because to hold on to letting go is also an attachment. So we let go of even that. It goes on to talk about other stuff in this sutra. Talks about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or the 4 establishments of mindfulness. And then it talks about 7 factors of enlightenment, which is another sequential. It's a list, lots of lists, but it's also a sequential practice which works in conjunction with this, or is another way of looking at this. So again, it's kaleidoscopic and somewhat encyclopedic as a teaching. But that's the teaching. I find it very beautiful, very accessible, very practical. We can work through it from the beginning to the end. We can pick out different pieces that we want to work on at a particular time. As I said, as best I can tell, it probably was, if not exactly what Buddha was practicing during his lifetime, at least very close to it. It is, in a sense, it's a very simple teaching, and it doesn't prescribe an awful lot of stuff. So it's like those of you who play musical instruments, it's like if you pick up a Beethoven piano sonata and you learn how to play that sonata, it starts off as being a piece written by Beethoven, but after you've been playing with it for a while and you've gotten familiar with it and you've really built your own expression into it, it's no longer Beethoven. It's me. It's Gareth's piece. You own it. You move into a place where you own it. And this is a practice where as one lives and grows with it, one moves into it being your practice, and you own that practice. So I think that's enough of me talking. I'm not sure how we moderate discussion here, but I would like to move into a discussion phase. So I'm happy to just let discussion unfold, or to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. That's Tom, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have any question right now. I just wanted to say it's a really great talk. And I'm embarrassed. I probably read that thing 20 years ago and hadn't thought about it since. And so I'm really glad that you brought it up, because it really does sum up everything, or it sums up an awful lot of really important stuff in a few words.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that the monks memorized all of that and passed it on from monk to monk, memorizing it for several hundred years before it was written down. So thanks to you, and thanks to all the monks that memorized it over the centuries. I can't think of a question right now, so that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Tom.
Hi, Gareth.
Hey, Uma.
I have two questions.
Uh-huh.
Can you hear?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. First, I very much enjoyed, because I try to follow these steps while I'm meditating. But my two questions are, first, does it have to be in that particular order, from body moving to feelings to mind to phenomenon, or it can happen without any effort or systematic planning?
Mm-hmm.
That's first question. Second is, does it happen consciously? Do we consciously try to achieve these steps, or it happens automatically?
Yeah, great questions. So to the first one, there are different teachers will give you different answers to that. Thich Nhat Hanh, who many of you will have heard of, he is Vietnamese. He was a Vietnamese teacher, built a monastery in the south of France, and he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Reverend Martin Luther King. He has written a commentary on this, in which he talks about how you just pick and choose. If you like a particular one of these, just go do it. But the particular text I was using here in the commentary that I like best, he talks about the importance of going through it from the beginning. And his thesis is, it doesn't matter how fast or slow you go through it. Just start at the beginning. If you've got half an hour, spend half an hour. That's like 3 minutes a step, or 2 minutes a step. If you've got an hour, 4 minutes a step. But just go through it from start to finish. My own personal experience is, I find more value in starting at the beginning in a very simple way. I find that if I don't spend the time at the beginning on my breath, slowing down the breath, then the experience of body, not just slowing down the breath, but being with the breath and letting things calm, then the experience of moving into the body is not as deep an experience of being in the body. So I personally find there is real value in the sequence. I apologize, Uma. Remind me of your second question.
Second question. So do we consciously?
Oh, conscious versus no, yes. So that's such a convoluted question, such a convoluted point. Nisargadatta, who many of you are familiar with, somewhere in his dialogues said, we're not aware of 90% of what goes on in this body. Why the hell do we care so much about the 10% we are aware of? Let's just not be aware of any of it. And then there's another book I read about enlightenment experiences or realization experiences, where the author says there are, not sure there's any difference between the two, but there are two different things here. One is there's a realization experience of which one is conscious.
Yeah.
And so you can come back and you can tell stories of it. And the other is there's a realization experience of which one is not conscious. Yes. So one just goes into a trance for like a day or two, and then comes back and a day or two is gone. So was there consciousness there or was there not? It's just this sack of skin and bones doesn't have the consciousness. So it's a very tricky question. And I think it's one to let unfold, as a practical matter, it's just one to let unfold naturally. Without paying too much attention to it.
I thought so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Is that Bhagirath?
Yes, yes. When you say Bhagirath, actually, many people shorten it to Girath, which is like Gareth. Isn't that amazing?
That's great. I love it.
Okay. One thing which appeals to me the most about the approach of Buddha, that he was in his mind, keeping in his mind people who are not elite, common grassroots people. He wanted to help them. He didn't want to be a Mahatma or be known forever.
Right.
That is why he says, if you meet Buddha again, destroy him.
Yeah.
Because his whole idea was different. And therefore, the two different adjectives that you use, that this sutra are simple and deep.
Yeah.
So those people who do not have a convoluted way of thinking, they would take the simple route. And those people who want to go through the elite part of that one, for them is the depth.
Right.
But some of the things that he has condensed are amazingly appealing. For example, you said about shunya, the same thing. If you ask, how do you define health? So health is a status of body where the body is not conscious of body. The moment one part of the body we are conscious of, that means we lost our peace there.
Right.
I say, now I'm hurting here, now I'm hurting here. I cannot do, because you are aware of your body. And that's why he went to the idea of unawareness. Number two, the impermanence that you are talking about is also very important, because he has actually studied Hinduism extremely well. And like any other old religion, it starts gathering rust and dust. And he wanted to clean that up so that it is available to everyone. So impermanence is nothing but a stage of transition. And therefore it keeps on looking. If you don't like it, wait for a while, it will come back to what you like it. Like we used to say in Boston, if you don't like the weather, wait for a while, it will change.
That's right.
So that way, he built up the patience of the people, the trust of the people, the confidence of the people. Those are the impermanence I looked at the same way. And plus, when you say breath actually is an oxygenation, which is a very important part of the tissue, but then oxygen comes with carbon dioxide. Otherwise, the body will not function. That intricate mixture of good and bad, desirable and undesirable, is a part of the very phenomenon of body.
Yep.
You see, so these are the kind of points which appeal to me the most, and therefore everything that you said made tremendous sense to me, but in a simplified way.
It's very simple. So a couple of things, you point me at a couple of things here. Yeah. Who is breathing in the first place? If I paying attention to the breathing, I think I'm breathing, but if it were left up to me, I'd forget and I'd die. So who's really doing this breathing thing anyway? And what is this breathing thing? Is it an engine that's bringing oxygen into my body? Or is it an engine that's taking other gases out for the rest of the planet? I mean, we have a lens through which we see this activity, and if we slow down and really pay attention to it, it's not what we think it is. So Buddha being a universal teacher, many years ago now, I was in India and having dinner with a Jain family, and they observed that Mahavira,
Yes.
who was the founder of the Jain faith, was the teacher of enlightenment, and that Buddha was the teacher of abolishing the caste system.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they understood. And certainly in his teachings, there are many times when people come forward and talk about, the Brahmins are the be all and end all. And he said, well, really? So how about if a Brahmin is like this versus, the other castes? So he takes it down to our own virtue and practice as opposed to our caste. So that is very much part of the teaching. And something else he does, which I think really points at what you're saying, there is another sutra called the Kalama Sutta, in which he visits a village where they've had, as was the practice at the time, any number of visiting teachers wander through and lecture on their particular doctrine or their particular view of reality. And they said, "World honored one, you're sitting here now and you're about to spout forth on your particular story. We've had Fred, we've had Sally, we've had Juanita, we've had Munir, we've had all these people come through here, and they've all told us their stories. Why should we believe you versus them?" He says, Don't. Trust yourselves. You know. Listen to what you're told and see, and he's got various lenses he puts it through, but pick common sense lenses and see if it makes sense. Don't just believe. Which again is very democratic. Anyway, that's anybody else?
Could you put the book up to the screen so I could take a photo of it?
Surely. It's
Oh,
that's
no.
not really working very well, is it?
No, just tell me the name of it. And don't. Oh, wait.
I'll tell you what it is. Actually, I'm sure Cindy can post this later, but it is called Mindfulness with Breathing. And the author is Buddha Dasa.
Got it.
So that's Buddha Dasa, D-A-S-A, Bhikkhu.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
This is Tom again. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Tom.
Okay. So one of the things I wonder about in the old Buddhist text, when we get meditation instruction today of following the breath, generally it'll say, follow the breath, and when your mind wanders, bring it back to the breath. It assumes that the mind will wander. And I've always wondered if there's anybody whose mind doesn't wander. And I ask a lot of people, and nobody's ever said that they stopped. The process that I notice in myself, that I'll be sitting and meditating, breath in, breath out, calm, peaceful, and then suddenly I realize that I've spent the last 5 minutes thinking about my income taxes, and I completely forgot that I was meditating. It's like a type of amnesia. And I used to think that was just some problem I had until I started asking people, and it seems to be just about universal. I wonder if back in Buddha's day, when those guys were just monks in the forest and meditating all day long, if they had that experience, because he doesn't mention it, or I'm not aware of him mentioning it. But then sometimes I think, well, they just assumed that everybody had that experience, and your teacher would tell you that that's to be expected. What are your thoughts?
So, of course, we can never know because we can't get in the time capsule and go back there and find out. But what strikes me is, firstly, there are a couple of places that I've come across in the sutras, and if you are really interested, I could try and find them and send you a reference to them, Tom. But there are a couple of places that I've come across where Buddha is asked by somebody, so is an enlightened one somebody who's always paying attention to the minutiae that's going on around him? And he says, of course not.
Huh.
But we come back to what I was talking about with consciousness, which is what really is this consciousness thing. We're conscious of 10% of what goes on in the body, but not 90%. Why do we pay? Why that 10%? It's just, and there is, when we train ourselves, we deeply ingrain, we uproot conditioned behaviors and open up the possibility for connected, compassionate behaviors. And those then become natural responses. So there's, I would submit, some kind of awareness, some kind of consciousness that's happening at that level, which may not be accessible to this lump of gray flesh inside here, but it's there because it's governing behavior. It just happens. And then the piano playing example, when you're deeply immersed in physical activity or in living your life, gardening, doing the laundry, whatever it is, we reach that place of immersion and there is just no thought. What is the question that you're asking in that context, Tom? So these different, and that's a rhetorical question to you, but there are these different levels and these different depths of mindfulness. One of the, you may remember him, Ken Sharp is a member at Red Clay. He's a retired Delta pilot. And he says in the cockpit, you always have a pilot and a co-pilot. The co-pilot's down here dealing with the controls and looking at the dials. And they're very, very mindful, very aware of what's going on. But they actually have no idea of where the plane is in space, really. And the pilot's sitting there looking out of all the windows. So you've got these two different levels of awareness and mindfulness that are manifest even in flying a plane. How much more so navigating this sack of skin and bones through life?
I had,
Pierce.
well, yeah, just on that same thought there, Tom. I recall attending one of the CBCT sessions at the Drepung Losling with Geshe Negi. And a similar question came up just about the types of experiences in meditation. And I think the person was experiencing something of, you know, in the terms, I guess, at the Vedanta Center, it might be perhaps something similar to a meditative state, but that would be driven fully by tamas, you know, tamasic energy of just almost like a brain dead. So, and Geshe Negi's response was that is, you know, there is a hole that you can get into. I don't experience this because I, like you, Tom, am constantly battling, you know, the gerbil on the wheel brain, as you were describing there. But that apparently some people might experience this state of just complete like apathy, that is still perhaps maybe appears calm to some extent, but is not the focus of that particular type of meditation, where you are expected to be very engaged and focused and that type of thing. That stuck with me as kind of an interesting differentiation of types of experiences that people might have in their meditation practices.
The core of all of these is whatever it is, don't get stuck on. Because if you get stuck on it, you've gone astray. Impermanence, everything is impermanent. We get attached to this mind state, that is going to cause us suffering in the long run. And a broad way of looking at the question we're just talking about here is if you go back, and again, I think this is just such a powerful teaching. If we go back to the third section in here of mind like sky, mind as space, then it is perfectly natural, and it's not easy. It's simple and perfectly natural, and yet not easy, but something one can cultivate, to be there with mind like sky and have these incredibly busy thoughts just running across the plane of our mind, and just watch them go, not be really caught up in at all, just be amused by these things running by. So which is really me? Where's the mindfulness? Where's the, what's really going on there? Just that awareness of being, of associating with that open sky to create the space for our body and our mind to behave like a human body and a human mind.
Can you hear me okay, Gareth?
Yeah.
Okay, so along these lines, another question. I've gone through periods where I tried very hard to maintain one pointed attention on my breath. It never worked. And so another question that I ended up asking a lot of experienced meditators, especially people who had been monks, and I asked Lobsang Negi, who you're talking about, I've asked a bunch of people, does it do any good to try harder? And the response is almost always no.
Yeah.
So what I do now is, rather than, I had a tendency, they say when your mind wanders, bring it back to your breath.
Mm-hmm.
But I put it an additional step. When my mind wandered, I would tell myself I was a miserable failure at meditation and then come back to the breath.
That's right.
And that's just one extra, like, neurotic thought that gets in the way. Now what I do is, when my mind wanders and I come back to the breath, I say, oh, how wonderful. Once again, I woke up. I was trapped in thoughts, And once again, I woke up, and that's the nature of the human mind. Without any effort at all, my mind wanders, and then I wake up, and my mind wanders, and I wake up. And that's what's working for me. And because I'm a sort of like success-oriented American, I do have a tendency to say, well, you're just lazy. But that's not true. That's not true. The meditation is to not try too hard and just pay attention. Or that's my current thinking anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll add a couple of thoughts to that. So it sounds like it's kind of related directly to things I've said before. When the mind wanders, whose mind is wandering? There's something wandering. There's something not wandering. I mean, there's just thoughts going on over here somewhere. Why do I think that's me? Why is it my mind that's wandering? There's just thoughts. So there's a lot of this isn't so much a change of substance as a change of perspective. It's the allowing ourselves to get associated with the thoughts, to get caught up in the thoughts, to think, I'm following my thoughts. They're just thoughts. I'm here all along. The other one, try harder. Yeah, I suspect they didn't just say no. I suspect they all did what I did, which is laugh at you first, or laugh with you first. But my experience of that, try harder, yeah, it doesn't work. But what does try harder really mean? There's something that I do find useful. Practices get stale. So it's like the one on the mind we were talking about. Gladdening the mind, that's actually one I plagiarized. The approach there is one I plagiarized from Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, it's really hard to pay attention, to concentrate, if our mind isn't glad. So let's work on gladdening the mind, and then we've got the energy, we've got something to allow us to be more focused on concentrating. Giving ourselves new tools, giving ourselves new tricks is really powerful to help concentration. So when your practice gets stale, just add something to it, or change something a little bit. Or put that one on one side for 6 months and go do a slightly different practice for 6 months. And this I think can be really valuable, because not only do practices get stale and we kind of lose interest in them and drift, so our practice becomes less rich and less fertile for growth. But the other piece of practices getting stale is we're creating new ruts. And so much of our practice is about breaking down habits. So this is not to suggest changing practices every 2 or 3 weeks, because we need to have some level of stability, some solidity to go deep into something, but to create space in what we're doing to allow us to recognize that maybe it's time to do something a little different, and maybe there's value in just shifting our energy to something a little different.
Gareth, I noticed that you have that open sky behind you. Obviously, it's very meaningful to you. When you're in that open sky space and you're doing the practices in that way, what is your experience of who is doing it?
Yeah. It's the same as the question about the breathing, Shankara, which is, who is breathing? There's just breathing.
But there's a certain deliberation about things like gladdening the mind and changing practices so that it doesn't become stale. And clearly, the invitation is to be in that open sky space. So I'm just wondering, what is your experience of when you are in that space? Who is there? Who is it that who is being?
So my personal experience of all of this, which is just mine, right? I mean, there's no rights or wrongs about this. This is just mine. I disappear for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. I don't have multiple day disappearances, but I find myself just disappearing, and I'm not falling asleep. So there's something there. So there's no way of saying, there's no who in there. There's not even consciousness in there in the way that I recognize it, that I can hold on to it. I do move around in the everyday world. I'm on this Zoom call with you all here. I engage in human activities, and this practice, this big sky, mind like sky practice, creeps into that, so that it is more natural for me to just be in a physical activity, be in a conversation, and be really in that. There's something I read many years ago which really resonates and I hold very dear, which is, you know when you're in the presence of a truly spiritual person, because when you look in their eyes, you know that the only thing in their universe right now is you. There's that level of intensity. So that's bringing this whole mind-like sky to everyday practice, to everyday living. So that's a manifestation. And then in between those, it's a mess. Because, we do need energy, we do need intention, and we do need to direct ourselves to make this work, to give ourselves momentum, and to keep ourselves on point. And that allows for the loss of self experiences. So there's this back and forth with lots of gray edges between the two. So it's not an either or in my experience. There's the way I would. This is not in the ancient teachings, but it's in a lot of the Tibetan. Yes, in a lot of the Tibetan teachings, and there are two truths in Buddhism. There's the absolute truth, which is the one we're pointing at, the mind-like sky, there's no self, all there is emptiness, including the emptiness of emptiness. And then there's the relative truth, which is of, whatever this is, 30 people hanging around talking to each other, and a computer screen and electric cars. And this isn't an either or. This is recognizing neither of those teachings is superior to the other. They're both different statements of reality. They both coexist.
Yes.
So it's not toggling back and forth between the two. The realization experience, the enlightenment experience, is where those two exist at the same time.
Very well said.
Answer, but does that answer the question, Brother Shankar?
Very, very well said. Yes, very much so. And I also really like something you said earlier about, you used the metaphor of a Beethoven sonata or whatever, that you practice the Beethoven sonata until it becomes your own.
Right.
And then that relates to the your statements about, there's a workbook. There's this series of steps. There's a series of things to do. You do that until it becomes your own. Then you're on your own.
Right.
And to put it in the terms we tend to use, the mind becomes the guru. Your own mind, the grace of the mind,
Yes,
becomes your guru. So I really like that, the metaphor that you used and the way you expressed that.
thank you.
We've just got a minute or two left. Anybody else?
Yes. Gareth,
Yes, Uma.
I'm trying to figure out how does this teaching compares with Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Because in Patanjali, it's all about Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That is the control of the what you call movement of the mind, all the ups and downs, all negative emotions, and how to manage and how to control all these very, very turbulent emotions. But in Buddhism, these states that you described, mind is only space.
Mhm.
Open sky. So Buddha doesn't talk about controlling those various kinds of emotions, which like anxiety, depression, or
Yeah.
what you call dukkha,
Mhm.
or feeling sad. So we are continuously experiencing ups and downs of emotions. So I'm trying to figure, just like Patanjali prescribed yama and niyama, certain
Yep.
senses,
Yep.
which Buddha doesn't seem to bother about. You know, he just talks about focusing and letting go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is just one teaching, and there's a massive array of Buddhist teachings.
Yeah.
And a lot of Buddhist teachings do talk about exactly what you're pointing at, Uma. I find this one a particularly valuable one, and I thought it would be one that would resonate here and that would work with this group. But just to address your question specifically, the teachings of the precepts, as they're called in the translation of the text that I'm familiar with, the moral code, the virtues, those are very important. In Buddhism, there are 6 sense gates, the 5 physical senses, and the mind is regarded as a 6th sense because we construct the world in our mind. So we interact with the world through our mind. And there is a practice of controlling the sense gates, which is very much interceding between ourselves and the world to put barriers up. So there's an awful lot in there. There's a lot of teachings about the 6 sense gates and about managing the 6 senses and understanding what they are. So it really is a very important part of the library of Buddhist teachings.
Which text do you refer?
There's a lot of them. I can't give you single text, but
okay, thanks. So there is some instruction regarding how to manage your emotions yourself.
There's a lot in there. It was very practical teaching. Very practical teaching.
Thank you.
Gareth, may I ask you a question, please?
Please, Rita.
This is Rita. You have mentioned cultivating feelings of connected compassion and gratitude, and that is a very important goal and product of meditation. But in the theory of Buddhism, the description of existence is shunyata. So how do you make an adjustment for that contradiction there?
So I'll take you back to one of my favorite teachers, one of my primary teachers, which is Nisargadatta, who I have never met, but he's one of my teachers. When I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I am everything, that is compassion. Between these two shores, my life flows. No contradiction. No contradiction at all. So shunyata is emptiness, and when I'm emptiness, that's wisdom. But I have to recognize that if I hang on to emptiness, that's a problem. Emptiness is empty. Emptiness is there because it allows everything. Everything is not possible without emptiness. So when I see the other side of that, when I am the other side of that, I am compassion. Again, it's holding these two at the same time.
Thank you. Very nicely explained. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Namaste, Gareth. I have you talked about impermanence. How can can you reiterate that? Because I understood the flower part, but the later part I missed kind of.
Well, I think if you really understood the flower part, you've got it. Impermanence is all we have is right here, right now. And, a minute later or a minute earlier, everything's different. Everything. There is actually nothing to hold on to. And the activity, the foolishness of trying to hold on to anything, doesn't matter what it is is going to bring us suffering. So the point of the teaching is, and the Buddha did not teach stuff just because this is how he saw the world. He only taught things that he thought were useful. And the utility of the teaching of impermanence is to really break us, to really expose to us the futility of holding on to anything at all, even the teaching of impermanence. And that doing so would do nothing but bring us suffering.
I see. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, Gareth, thank you so very much for spending this time with us. So beautifully expressed, so beautifully expounded based on just such a small portion of the teachings, but so profoundly gathered together. And as you said, the Buddha was always concerned about how can I practically help people out of their suffering? What can be done? And so beautifully, beautifully, beautifully said. So any other final thoughts or questions from anyone before we close?
I wanted to add one thing. Can you hear me?
Yes, Bhagirath.
The questions answered by Gareth are very helpful because they exactly answer the confusion in the minds of many. Right now, there is a series on Buddha paid by Netflix. And although it is more spectacular, it gives you the spectrum of the growth from birth to the last point, how and why Buddha developed that way. And in answer to the previous questions, he also goes through the same turbulent times during meditation, because the initial factors which moved him to Buddhism, they come to his mind over and over again. The sick people, the dying people, the deceased people, the wars, the killing. So it's not that he doesn't visit his meditation phase, but then he uses them as stepstones to pursue his further things further, rather than being an obstacle in his path of what he wanted to achieve in his life. So it depends upon whether it's a stepping stone, a milestone, and how you want to exactly use it. So that is one part I wanted to discuss. The second point, when you came, Brother Shankar had the same question about Akasha, the sky, the space. It's amazing. The Sanskrit word for that are two, Akasha and also Avakasha. Avakasha means scope, means there is a potency in the space that you see around. So it's not, Akasha is not up above, it is right within us. like the 5 elements that we say the body is maintained of. I was just thinking that as a medical student, one surgeon was very fond of asking the question, what is the color of the hernial sac? The answer is blue. Why is it blue? The answer, if you want to really satisfy him, will be because the sky is blue. But I gave that answer only to pass the test. Now I understand what it means, because that blue sky is all around and in us also. And there is a scope to expand that further, to explore that further, and develop your inner understanding. That's the way I feel.
Thank you, Bhagirath. Anything else from anyone? All right. Gareth, do you have a closing prayer or any final thought that you want?
The way I would close this would not be with a prayer, it would be with a dedication of merit. So I would be delighted to offer a dedication of merit if you would like me to, Brother Shankar.
Please.
So first, thank you all so much for letting me talk to and with you for the last hour. It has been an honor and a privilege, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
The Buddha said that when we dedicate merit, it is just like adding a drop of water to the ocean. Just as a drop of water added to the ocean will not dry up, but will exist as long as the ocean exists, so too, if we dedicate the merit of any virtuous action, it merges with the vast ocean of merit and endures until enlightenment. May all who encounter this ocean of merit find peace and loving kindness in their hearts and extend it to all beings. By the power of this compassionate practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all live in equanimity.
Thank you, Gareth. I don't think there's any need to add our usual closing prayer to that. That was so beautifully said and put. So with that, we will just say Om, Om, Om. And again, Gareth, so glad you were able to make this time. And I'm sure that everyone who was with us this morning got a great deal out of it. Until next time, I will say this prayer. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. Go in Mother's loving and protective embrace. Again, Gareth, we'll talk.
We'll talk.
Jai Shri Ramakrishna, Jai Ma, Jai Buddha.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.